Cloud.
And Chandra, did you make that screen about biotech, the last one of your presentation?
This one, Biotech Breakthroughs?
Mhm.
All right, I can make
That
that.
in the order.
All right, there you go.
Thank you all for joining us this evening. We're just getting settled in and we're so glad that you're here. And we will begin in just a couple minutes. Please feel welcome to use the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. Hello, Nate from North Carolina. Thank you for being here. Indira with the Bay Area. Thank you. For those of you who are just signing on, we're just about to begin in about 2 minutes. Okay. Well, welcome to our Biotech Breakthroughs, Exploring the Frontiers of Innovation. I'm Jennifer, your host from Pro Ventures, and I'm delighted to host this live webinar event for everyone. And we hope you are as excited as we are to learn from our distinguished speaker, Chandra, and to network more in the biotech space. As we proceed through the presentation, we encourage you to make use of the chat box to share your contact information, including your location, LinkedIn profile, email, any other relevant details. This is a great opportunity to expand your professional network and connect with like-minded individuals who share your passion for biotech innovation. If you have any questions for our speaker, please use the Q&A feature to submit them. We should have plenty of time to answer your questions and hear Chandra's responses. Before we begin, please allow me to tell you a little bit more about Pro Ventures. As an organization, we help elevate entrepreneurs across multiple industries. Our mission is to help guide entrepreneurs and help provide resources using our meetup group, our LinkedIn page, and our website. You can subscribe now to our free newsletter at proventures.org. And again, thank you for joining us this evening. We hope you enjoy this presentation. And at this time, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about Chandra, our speaker. Chandra is a serial entrepreneur, an investor, and an inventor with deep experience in technology and startup financing. With a background in biophysics and bioinformatics, Chandra's interests lie in fintech, health tech, and longevity. He is currently the executive chairman at Portal Finance, where he founded a secure peer-to-peer financial application infrastructure based on Bitcoin. Chandra also founded FounderPool Inc., a software fund that reduces the financial risk to entrepreneurs and increases their odds of succeeding in their startups. Chandra's impressive career includes developing a non-invasive way of treating obesity and diabetes without surgery, and leading the company through Series A financing and preclinical testing. He also created an AI-based nutrition company that personalized nutrition based on DNA data, biomarkers, and activity with fitness data. During this live webinar presentation, Chandra will share his insights and experiences in the industry, and we encourage you again to please ask any questions with the Q&A section. Well, without further ado, Chandra, please take it away.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, Jen. Happy to join. Let me do a quick slide share on Zoom. All right, let's hope everybody can see this. Can everyone see this? Okay, I'm assuming. Okay. All right, cool. All right, I'm going to start. So my goal today is to talk about how software can help us lead to better research and outcomes in the longevity space. So first, let's start with defining what longevity is. The problem with with this space in particular, which has always been the next big thing, is that aging is never a defined object that most people think is worth tackling. Right? We progressively age, we die, which basically means the probability of death increases over time. But directly addressing how do we delay the aging process, how do we increase health span, and how we understand and manipulate the process of aging is never been clearly defined. The factors that lead to it have never been focused on for a good reason. So it's a complex field, for one thing. And two, it's hard to do experiments in this space. For someone to make a claim that this extends lifespan, you have to have enough data over enough time where the number of people treated with an intervention actually outlive the people that haven't been treated with it. And just because of human timescales, it takes very long. And
Chandra,
it's very expensive.
Sorry to interrupt you, but do you want to refresh your page? It seems that most of our attendees aren't seeing your slides.
Oh.
It says it's still loading. You might just need to do it.
I wonder why. I think the screen sharing was, well, I'm trying to do resume share, and it keeps saying that my screen sharing is paused. Somehow the button doesn't work. Why don't I do this? Let me stop screen sharing and restart it.
There we go.
That work now?
Now it's loading again.
Oh, there's going to be some kind of an error.
We actually had it for a second, but then it looks like you went to a specific slide.
Or you may want
Okay,
to,
so why don't I try a different setting? Just give me 1 second. I'll just share the entire desktop. That way it may work better.
We can see that.
How about you
Yeah,
can see that now?
yes.
Okay, good. So that was the issue. I think when I instead of changing, yeah, I should probably just go
And-
back to where I
and
was.
Chandra?
All right, so
Chandra,
Mhm.
one more, on the chat, if you click on the 3 little dots by the chat, you can set it so that everybody can chat with everybody else. Since you're the host, I can't do that.
all right, so hosts and panelists who can see your messages.
Everybody should see everybody's. Oh, that's
Attendees can chat with everyone. Yep, attendee. Yeah, I changed it.
great.
Great. So as I was saying, problems with aging is it's hard to do experiments on this because nobody can wait for a 100-year experiment to get the results and then implement the interventions across the population. 2, we indirectly address this, and there's this level of fatalism where we accept that, yeah, we are born, we age, and we die, and this is just a quirk of human cognitive capacity, that things that take too long and are too complex, we just tend to either ignore them or we sweep them under the rug and don't focus on them. So it's a tough process to determine what works to slow down aging or to advance lifespan. But the problem is huge. If you think about the impact of aging, everybody talks about by 2050, there will be about 400 or 500 million people that will be older than 80. The disease burden, which is directly linked to aging, is huge. After 5th decade, the costs, just the public health costs of dealing with diseases of aging, of which most chronic conditions are diseases of aging, it just keeps rising rapidly till the end of life. So just delaying the aging process itself and the age-related degenerative diseases has a much bigger impact, both financially and on longevity. For example, it's 5 times more impactful to delay the onset of age-related diseases than to delay the onset of cancers alone, or 10 times more impactful than reducing the burden of death and morbidity due to heart disease. So it's a big problem. We all intuitively, intrinsically understand that it's a big problem, but it's hard to do anything about it. And why is that? Well, one, if you can't measure something, you can't manage it. This is from Alfred Sloan. He was talking about industrial processes in GM, but it applies very well to most things we do in life. You can't measure anything, right? You can't measure the rate of aging other than with chronological age. And that's it. 2, almost nothing worked in the lab, except in C. elegans, in which case everything works, but rarely do these therapies and interventions translate to vertebrates or higher forms of life. The third is a systemic problem where there is no regulatory pathway for you to go to the FDA and say, I have this intervention that works, and then they will ask you, what disease does it treat? And aging is not considered a disease. So there is no regulatory approval pathway clear or specified for this. And 2, you're not going to go ask Medicare or CMS for reimbursing for a specific intervention, and they're going to say, well, it's not a covered disease state. So it's a big problem. So let's talk about the first one first. How do we measure aging? Until now, the only way we were measuring aging was by use of simple counting, right? How many years have you lived? Just chronological age. Biological age can be measured. This comes across from the entire field started to shift in 2013 when Steve Horvath from UCLA published the first paper on measuring epigenetic age acceleration using DNA methylation patterns in humans. And full disclosure, I know Steve very well. He's a good friend and a great scientist. I sincerely believe that the advent of epigenetic clocks and then the later improved versions, the Hannum clock, the phenome age, and Grimm age, and all of these other clocks, and now everybody's in a race to create a clock of their own, is like what happened to the ocean exploration before we had a chronometer. You weren't able to precisely measure longitude. So it's kind of an uncharted journey. So you didn't really know where you were going, you weren't sure. And so it's hard to actually make big voyages across the vast ocean. So that's where we were before 2013. Since then, the entire field has changed. Now you have the epigenetic clock, which is a very, very good measure that at least correlates very well with or predicts mortality, predicts longevity, and disease-free survival. And it's in 2023, we can say that that is the gold standard. Have there been other curious breakthroughs in the field of aging? Yes, absolutely. In 2005, Ira Conboy from Tom Randall's lab at Stanford published the heterochronic parabiosis experimentation, which is you basically connect the circulatory systems of two mice that are different in age, and old mouse is connected to a young mouse, and they share the circulatory system, and something magical happens, as the cartoons often depict. And the older mouse turns younger, manifestly, demonstrably, objectively younger, skin, muscle, skeletal muscle, heart, wherever you measure, CNS, skin. And that was another breakthrough. It almost had miraculous side effects. It was replicated across multiple different labs at Berkeley, at Harvard, Stanford, multiple different labs at Stanford, and many different organ systems, CNS, skeletal muscle, you name it, pancreas, you name it, it's been replicated. So there are curious breakthroughs that are possible. The problem is, with most interventions, it is impractical to replicate them in humans, right? No one's going to agree to be connected to another human being, kind of like whatever that German movie was, the Centipede or something. And it's just impractical to do these experiments on humans. So what are we left with? Well, we know what to measure now. We kind of have a reasonable idea of what kind of interventions work in lab animals. So what do we do? Where do we go from here? I'm going to argue that there are several missing pieces, but the big one is having a good software solution or solutions. So what are we currently doing with software? Well, if you Google biotech software or software that helps pharmaceutical companies or biotech companies, you'll see a ton of ads for the low-hanging fruit. Like, for example, you'll see a ton of competitors trying to do what Viva Systems did, which is CRM for pharma sales reps. You'll see workflow improvement software, because SaaS, or software as a service, is a popular model with investors and entrepreneurs. So you see everything from reporting to compliance to supply chain to laboratory information management systems and notebooks. But that's just the low-hanging fruit. There's nothing that suggests that this couldn't have been done 10 years ago. Yes, you could argue software as a service wasn't there, the bandwidths weren't supporting it. Be that as it may, it could have been done on-prem. Nothing really groundbreaking. So what else is groundbreaking? So the traditional way of drug discovery is a lab-related breakthrough. A new pathway is elucidated, some compounds are hypothesized, and you do rational drug design, and then you test it, and then you increasingly test it, in vitro, preclinicals, clinicals, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then you get to the approval and availability in the market. But with increasingly powerful software systems, you can actually simulate many compounds for many different targets in parallel based on your understanding of the pathophysiology of a disease state. And then you predict, and then you design, and then you test. So the goal is to reduce the time it takes to get from a hypothesis to an intervention in the market. It's kind of obvious. Big breakthroughs have been made in this. AlphaFold, which was a really big deal. I mean, the structure function relationships of proteins, or being able to predict the functional relevance just from understanding the sequence of amino acids, is a pretty big deal. So some breakthroughs have happened in that space. What else is missing? I would argue that the healthcare system itself is a big experiment. So think of what happens in a hospital or in a clinical setting. There's a patient. Patient has a defined clinical state, which dynamically changes over time. There are people whose life's work it is to document and address these issues, that are doctors and nurses and other providers. There is clean, consistent, labeled data about the health state of each patient, right? That's longitudinal data. If you're a computer scientist, that's time series data, which is tailor-made for all sorts of algorithmic analysis, whether you're talking about deep learning or whatever it is, or the new flavor of the year, which is large language models. So, but electronic medical record systems are not designed for this. They are actually designed as a very poor digital version of what used to happen when we had paper charts and pens and pencils. And it's just that they don't have hyperlinks. It's just a completely different use case and goal for electronic medical record systems. But that is where all of this wonderful data resides. Whether you're talking about objective findings, whether it is lab work, whether it is images and interpretation of images, whether it is objective documentation of patients' disease progression, symptoms, etc. EMR is the source of truth. They unfortunately are not built for either collaboration or for analysis. What about the other side of data? I was talking about just data as we commonly understand it, but a ton of data is collected in every hospital every day that just gets thrown away. Blood samples, tissue samples, all of those get analyzed for what they're actually being specifically queried for, and the rest of the samples are just thrown away. That's just how we do things. And if you can imagine a time when every patient's tissue sample, whether it is blood work or whatever other samples that we collect, it's all cataloged, it's categorized, and it's banked. So when there is a future hypothesis, asking a question and generating a hypothesis with a reasonable amount of confidence is as simple as pulling them out and doing an analysis. The goal is to get it to be as simple as generating a query in your favorite database system. And what stops us from actually collecting data from people who are going through experimental interventions that are off-label, with the goal of prolonging their health span. I mean, if you look at the fitness industry, it's common for the medical establishment and the medical regime to frown on anything that is outside of what's prescribed in a doctor's office. But I would argue that is a rich source of data. It is people taking their own health into their hands. And that's a very wonderful source of data because it's multidimensional, and people are highly motivated to actually understand the process of aging and prolonging their health span. What else? Well, that is about software as an entity in itself. But if you talk about the system that we have, the electronic medical record systems are silos of data, which is basically garbage collectors in a way. They never get used for anything outside of documentation and for billing purposes. They never get shared across organizations. There is no way for you to actually query them for no matter how important the situation is. You just can't break these walls. For you to be able to simply query existing data with a specific question and get a response is a simple software problem. It's that simple, but it has to go through a lot of bureaucratic hurdles. Institutional review boards have to approve your methodology, your process, and it's just as painful as pulling your teeth out. So most people don't even bother. Most practitioners who are interested in hypothesis generation don't even bother doing it. As many people saw how dysfunctional the healthcare system is or was in during the global pandemic, I would actually say that it's much worse. What you guys have experienced is just the tip of the iceberg. It's much, much, much worse. So, and this is just a software problem. All right, so what can we do with software systems that actually enable us to carefully document, analyze, and store high quality time series data across a large population? Then you get to actually see the movie. I would say that when you go to your doctor and once a year you get your blood work done, you're just getting a snapshot of a very dynamic, progressive process. We will start to understand the movie as it happens in real time if you have better software systems that are tracking these things automatically, and you're able to generate hypotheses and come up with interventions that then get tracked. It's the whole healthcare system becomes one big learning experiment that constantly feeds data onto itself and improves our understanding of all sorts of disease states. You can generate proteomic data, not just genetic or epigenetic data, but many, many more layers of understanding. And then maybe we will go full circle. People used to think that your organ systems age at different rates. Now we believe that aging is a global phenomenon that affects multiple organ systems in a person or in an organism. But as is the case with any disease state, the more you zoom in, the more you see that it is not just one disease. Like, for example, cancer is tens of thousands of diseases with different mutations, different causes, different therapies that they respond to, different ways of progression, and so on and so forth. So the more we understand, the more microscopic and fine-grained we can get to intervening in specific organ systems. Like, for example, maybe you look fine and you can run a 4-minute mile, but maybe your central nervous system is aging rapidly. We don't know because we can't look. So I think we will understand it at a much more fine-grained level, and that allows us to finely manipulate the process of aging, targeted towards specific people, specific organ systems with specific interventions. So a lot of progress in this space is going to come from just using what's available, right? What's been done so far. Big data, we talked about advancements in AI and analysis is definitely one. Biological clocks we talked about. The infrastructure, the software infrastructure that actually connects all of these silos of data with no uniform standards, no way to make them compatible, no way to actually make any sense of them, that has to change. I'll leave the hardest for last, but democratization of science is another big thing that we can accomplish, because there's already citizen science networks. We just look down on them and call them bro science, or we call them whatever else other names there are. But there are a lot of people who have the right to intervene and experiment on their own bodies, knowing the risks full well, and they're doing it. We just have to create better networks for them to share, better standardization of the process so the data actually doesn't just become polluted, but it actually helps our understanding of disease and helps everybody. And finally, we may be able to move from just looking for 6 or 7 different things. When your blood is drawn, we typically look for 7 or 14 or 21 different things, and then we throw away the sample. I would say the cost of much more fine-grained analysis, like for example, mass spec and proteomics, high throughput proteomics analysis, they're coming down rapidly. Some due to advancements in physics and some due to advancements in software and analysis, which is a big deal. We may be able to just save this in anticipation of a rapid lowering of the cost of analyzing all of these samples, well labeled, high quality samples consistently collected. And then in some future, it's not hard to imagine a future when we can just go back and analyze it because the costs are so much cheaper. As happens with technology, the cost of doing something is constantly deflating unless regulatory barriers or other artificial barriers stand in the way. So that's the conclusion of my presentation. As I promised Jen, I would keep it short. Happy to take any questions. I'm going to read through the chat and go through the questions as they come in.
Hey, Chandra, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
I just say
Go
all
for it.
questions for in. So the first one is kind of a particular question. You talked about that study where older mice were made younger by hooking their circulatory system to younger mice. Did the younger mice get older?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. So this
So
is
that's why my
thing.
kid's not going to agree to do this with me, right? Yeah.
Well, that's not a bad thought. But if you're interested in the history of parabiosis, this is very old. I believe it goes all the way back to 1850. It's a German physician by the name Paul Bert, I believe, BRT, first came up with the hypothesis. And he thought there was some kind of a humor in the blood of young people that just transfers the vigor and the vitality into, kind of sounds like a vampire movie. I get it, but turns out there's a lot of truth to it.
I'm picturing it, yeah. So here's a more serious general question. Currently, as I understand it, the FDA doesn't consider aging to be a disease.
Right,
so,
it doesn't. So there is no pathway. If I came up with,
right?
oh, it's a big problem. Let's say I came up with an intervention that works. There is no pathway for me to submit that because what disease are you treating? And if you say aging, there is none. It is not defined as a disease. It's more of a philosophical question. I actually think it should be. It's the greatest disease of all. Okay, so how asks, is there known databases that contain clinical data you mentioned from the patients? Yes, the electronic medical records save all patient data, but they're not built for analysis. They're just built for, you can think of electronic medical records as a very, very rough translation of paper and pencil charting to the digital realm, and that's it. And they're optimized to make hospitals money from billing. Now, if you think about the incentives in the system, EMR companies don't really care what happens to the data. What they care about is selling that system to a hospital, right? And what does the hospital care about? The hospital cares about getting paid for the services that they provide. And so they're all optimized for billing. And then they don't communicate with each other. About a couple of years ago, I believe in 2019 or 2020, there was this push to enforce compatibility standards across different electronic medical record systems. And Epic, the biggest one, fought them tooth and nail, and I don't think it became a regulation that's enforceable. So there's all sorts of players with perverse incentives that prevent standards and compatibility.
All right, I don't see any further questions. Jennifer, are you going to close?
Oh, I saw a couple. So
Okay, yeah,
Matt
do it.
Yo, Matt Yo says this idea of combining computing power in the physical world of collecting samples to identify targets for drug discovery isn't new. What's preventing us from moving a lot faster as a society when all the data is available through different silos? Is it integration or interoperability problem? It's an incentive problem. It's an incentive problem. It's not just collecting our DNA. Our DNA, we already collect. It's easy to do. But there's a lot more to understanding the physiology and pathology of aging than just DNA. Because think of it this way: your DNA doesn't change. You're born with it, and that's it, right? But everything that comes downstream of the DNA, the mRNA, the protein, everything further down actually changes. You are born with the same DNA and you die with the same DNA. So there's a lot more to it than just that. Noel says, when Grail started with multi-cancer early detection, the FDA couldn't approve it because there was no category for such a product. The solution was for the FDA to create such a category after some nudging from Grail, nudging in quotes. Perhaps something similar can be done for the category of aging. Well, I hope so. And I'd volunteer for that. I just don't know who has the power to nudge the FDA in the right direction. But I'd be happy to support it in any way I can. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who will as well. There's a creative way to do this, which is, it's a capital strategy issue for the most part. If you, for example, just went to all of the hospitals, and if you just said, just give us de-identified all sorts of patient samples, right? You can mask them, right? Only the hospital or the EMR system actually knows the true identity of what the sample is. And you can just bank them and you can do all sorts of analysis. It can be done.
All right. Did we get to every question, or did we have some? Did you
those are the only questions I saw. I don't see any more coming on. Maybe there's a little lag in the chat.
Okay, I might be able to help out with that. And were you able to answer the question about how AI might be able to be leveraged right now as a solution?
Well, so that I don't think the problem is with AI systems. The problem is, well, there's this old saying, right? Garbage in, garbage out. Give me better data and I'll give you better results, no matter how smart your algorithms are. That's just the way it is. We need to fix this at the data level before we can use all of the wonderful advances in deep learning and everything else in this space.
Okay.
John Davis says, is there an online course on this topic that you recommend? That's a tough question. I am not aware of it. Actually, that brings another problem. I'm not actually sure who's teaching aging as a course. Maybe we should. Our YouTube videos, yes, absolutely. Jeffrey Williams says our YouTube videos, yeah. I would say find a review article that you like that summarizes the process and advances in aging, right? These are easy to find. PubMed, you can get the full transcript. Look for the authors, and they probably have been invited to give some talks. So listen to the ones that you like. no matter how complex the papers are, when the authors actually give public presentations, they tone it down by a lot. So it's pretty good for general consumption. Sarah says, can IoT help in getting more data, especially with mobile devices that measure medical parameters? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. You know, fitness trackers are getting more and more advanced. Not only can we measure just your movement now you can measure your pulse oximetry, we can measure your ECG, and there are rumors that Apple is trialing photonics-based, basically spectroscopic ways of measuring compounds, you know, analytes in your tissue fluid. So if that works, then you'll have a lot more data and a lot more consistently from a lot of people. There are papers on partial reprogramming of stem cells. Yeah, Yamanaka factors, it's an interesting area. Big companies and lots of money has been invested in that space. It is an exciting area of reprogramming stem cells. Are there any compounds being studied for longevity that you happen to be taking? Good question. Yes. So alpha ketoglutarate and retinol, vitamin A. There's a good study actually measuring the epigenetic age reversal. That was, I believe it's used to be the CEO of Buck Institute. It's a good study, small sample. Then there's another one which I don't believe has measured the epigenetic clocks after the intervention, is NAD+. Basis and Elysium, I think, is the company that sells that. What else? An interesting one is the TRIM trial. The TRIM trial just used DHEA, metformin, and recombinant human growth hormone. Pretty spectacular results, not just in epigenetic clocks. It correlated well with thymic reconstitution as well, because as we understand it, the thymus degenerates over time. The interesting thing about this study is that it not just showed statistically that epigenetic or biological age was reversed. In the MRIs of the thymus gland, we actually see that fat is, when the thymus degenerates, it actually returns into parenchymal state, which is functional tissue. So that's an interesting one. But I'm pretty sure I can't give you the full list. There are people starting new trials every day, which is exciting. Do you expect there to be more companies like Elsan focused on creating LIMS to address this gap? Sure, if the opportunity is there, having a good, lab information management system is key to the whole endeavor. Yes, but I would actually say we should go further and make the entire electronic medical record system as a LIMS system, because it is. All right, Noel is recommending Huberman Lab from Stanford. That's very good. Peter Attia, Tim Ferriss covered this topic, and David Sinclair apparently also has a podcast now. So those are excellent resources.
Chandra, are you able to see the Q&A?
I'm just looking at the webinar chat window.
Okay, when you have a minute, see if you can field some questions from the Q&A. There should be a few in there that we haven't talked about yet.
Where is that?
It's one of the tabs on the bottom.
Okay. One of the, okay. All right. All right. Yep, found it. So open, one of the reasons health go. Okay, we addressed that. How says, looks to me, that software may help screen for leads, but we still need to do clinical trials. How can software help in this perspective? Many ways. Better clinical trial recruiting. Clinical trial recruiting is a pain. It's just that simple. And software is not just screening for leads. A clinical trial is nothing special, right? A clinical trial is not some magical thing where you have to pre-specify the endpoint and then you do your meditation and then the answer comes out. It's not that way. There is a whole field of study that looks at adaptive clinical trials. Adaptive clinical trials are when, instead of you saying, okay, I have my aspirin and I have this placebo, and I'm going to give this to 10 people, and I'm going to tell you what I will look for and when I will look for them and what results I am going to find, right? You have to pre-specify everything and you have to get the FDA to approve that. And then you go and do it. An adaptive clinical trial starts with two things. When the curves start to separate and you see the intervention taking an effect, you switch one with, you keep the control and you switch the other arm, and you dynamically adapt it as things change. It just requires you to do a lot more simulations ahead of time instead of being able to specify the endpoints. So it's not as simple as, oh, we need to do randomized clinical trials. I'm not a believer in the church of RCTs. There's a lot more ways to skin the cat. And in 2023, nobody should have the belief that RCTs are the be all and end all. Are there any compounds being studies that you have used for longevity? Again, like I said, alpha ketoglutarate I use, and retinol, it's just vitamin A, NAD+. Sana says, sorry if I missed this, but are you proposing a system to gain participants for studying reversing aging, or a system that aims to find markers of aging in patients? Both. Yeah, both. We should be able to do both. And anonymous attendee asks, to create a software product for longevity, what target might be the easiest to start? Great question. Hospitals, HMR companies, citizen scientists, or other. My personal belief, based on my experience, is that the worst clients or customers to work with are hospitals and EMR companies. So you got those two. So citizen scientists, sure, probably a better opportunity. If you go to a traditional VC, they will tell you that you are insane. What is your regulatory path? What's your reimbursement path? The usual stuff. Don't believe them. Opportunities always are hidden where nobody else is looking. So citizen science looks like a fad. It looks like a fun thing. It's a toy, but that's, I think, where big opportunities will be. If you're able to creatively produce software for healthcare and biotech companies in this space, you may be onto something. Also, these companies have money. Pharmaceutical companies have a lot of money, and they are woefully unprepared to build software systems on their own. So, big opportunity.
Are we on our last call for remaining questions? I think we answered quite a few. Speak now, as they say, or forever hold your peace. Let's see. I think you answered everything. So
Matteo says self-if the best reference. I'm not sure I understand, but you're welcome to clarify. So I think that's it with the Q&A.
Okay, thank you so much, Chandra, and thank you, Dr. Colby, for being here and supporting us. And please, you're on mute, Dr. Colby.
I know. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Chandra. That was great.
Yes, this was so insightful and we really appreciate it. And everyone, please check out proventures.org, sign up for the newsletter, keep in touch with our meetups, find our LinkedIn page. Also, you can find Chandra as well on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. So please stay in touch. We really appreciated having you all here, and enjoy the rest of your day or evening wherever you are in the world.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Jen, and thanks everybody. You can follow me on Twitter at CS Entropy.